This is the Post Shift Podcast, a raw look at the hospitality industry. Oh, what's up, Post Shifters? I just had a wonderful week in Montreal and Toronto. I was in Toronto for the Toronto Cocktail Conference, and I was the official podcaster, which is surreal as fuck for me because, as always, I always just do this like little side hustle as a sort of like a cathartic reasons, as my own therapy. But I had an absolutely mind-blowing time at TOCC, and I did 13 episodes, which is just, in my head, just mental that I actually pulled off 13 episodes in 2 days. So we've got a lot of epic content coming up. I was thinking on the way home, I literally landed 2.5 hours ago back in Victoria for the evening before I fly out to Singapore for 13 weeks. This is going to be the very, 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 very first episode of the Toronto Cocktail Conference series. Obviously 13. We're going to be listening to Toronto Cocktail Conference series till about Christmas time, which is just awesome to think about. But the cool thing is that I had to do it with one of my very, very close friends and someone who I've looked up to for many, many years, and that is the whiskey chef himself, Matt Jones. And I just had a blast with them. If you'll hear in the podcast that I'm pretty free and easy with this. I want to be authentic. I want people to talk about how they feel, how they got into the gigs and stuff like that. And I had a great time just talking about where he came from, what he did, and where he's going in the next little while. And I really am just thankful. And you'll hear some of these podcasts, I fanboy out a little bit, probably in these intros more so in person. But I got to sit down with some people that I would never have imagined 5 years ago that I would be sitting down to and interviewing. So I hope you enjoy this series. This is the first episode of the Toronto Cocktail Conference series. And thanks a lot, guys. Enjoy your week. Bye. But I keep it light and breezy. We usually start off by you introducing yourself. So you can introduce yourself now.
All right,
that was your cue.
Was that the same?
You missed it. You missed it, but it was okay.
That's it. Matt Jones, whiskey chef.
And you have that as a proprietary name. That is your title, regardless
trademark about to be registered.
Regardless of which whiskey brand you work for, you are the whiskey chef
with the E in parentheses.
Yep.
Yes.
And how long have you been the whiskey chef for?
That moniker kind of really came about in, I guess, 2012. I've always been the guy that at a house party, throw in the kitchen, I take stock of what's in the fridge and the cupboard, see what booze you have, and then we just have fun. And someone coined that, and I kind of ran with it. I remember talking to Frankie Solaric, a bar chef. Mm-hmm. I'm like, hey, bud, what do you think of this? And he actually gave me his blessing. So I was like, hey, I don't get any weirdness.
There's going to be no cease and desist orders in the mail.
That's right. But for the next 2 weeks, I'll be finishing my tenure as whiskey ambassador with Beam Suntory for the last 9 years.
Oh, I thought you'd already finished up.
No, I'm actually, today was my last day in the office. I did my last consumer-facing tasting last night. I've got like 2 more events in the Windsor area, and now it's just, the idea was to be training up my replacement in this week.
And who's the replacement?
Not announced yet.
Oh, okay.
We're down to final 3, so a little behind the 8 ball there. So I'll still have a dotted line in the company for the next little while, but no more official duties after the 23rd.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
and I know that's been a big move, because you've been with Suntory for how long?
9 years. Yeah, 9 years to the month.
That's substantial.
As the lifespan of a brand ambassador, for sure.
Yeah. It's not Angus Winchester, Raj,
right?
sort of numbers, but it's definitely up there. So you were born and raised Canadian, right?
Yeah.
And you're a Windsor boy, aren't you?
No, I was actually born just northwest of Ottawa, Pembroke, Ontario. Lived all over Ontario, got in the most trouble St. Catharines, Niagara over the years. But I went to school in Windsor back in 99, 98.
Don't age yourself too much, man.
Yep. That was my first bartending gig. I was actually slinging pizzas and working in kitchens. And as you know, my cousin Dean Sneals invented the Flair bottle, so I had that in my hands at a tender age. And then someone gave me a chance in the bar, and I never looked back.
Wow, and you've like, I think your career is quite colourful. Like, most people know you as the whiskey chef and the Beam Suntory brand ambassador and that sort of thing. But, like, you did time in Japan?
Yeah, it was 2 years in Japan, 4 years in the Caribbean and Belize. Had a little bar on the beach, which was a little tiki bar, which is
really
fantastic.
You never told me these stories. So, like, when I asked you to go, like, I never read, like, I know little bits, like, when we've been hanging out.
Yeah.
But, like, I
never went that far back.
No.
So I was backpacking through Central America when I was 19, 20. Actually, I'd won a bartending competition, one that Scott Young had put on.
Yeah.
That was out here. It was like Bar and Beverage Magazine thing, and I won a cruise, but the company that actually gave the cruise ended up it was a complete scam. So I never actually got my cruise. So I'm like, you know what? I take the prize money and I travel for a little bit. And it was only supposed to be like a few months. It ended up being 4 years.
Wow.
But went down to Belize, fell in love with Belize, lived in the jungle for quite a few months, but ended up on a little island called Key-Cocker for 2.5 years working for a Canadian couple.
Wow.
And they had a little Caribbean trattoria called Herbs and Spice in Paradise. Habaneros, Herbs and Spice in Paradise. And so I was making papaya shakes every morning with the local rum, and had a little tiki bar on the beach and barefoot. You know, I didn't wear shoes for 2 years. I had the hair down.
What year was that?
That was I came home in 2004. So yeah, I got there in 2000. But the last 2 years, and every year for hurricane season, we shut down for at least 2 months.
Yeah.
And the owners would take us somewhere. And 1 year we spent a month in Italy, just eating and drinking.
I find that whole area, like the hurricane season when everybody shuts down. Because I was talking to, when I went to the Bahamas, I was talking to the food and beverage director there at the Atlantis. He's like, oh yeah, hurricane season, no one comes here.
Right.
And I was like, when was the last time you got hit by a hurricane? He's like, 18 years ago.
Yeah.
But you can get rooms cheap.
Yeah.
No one goes in that area just in case there's a hurricane.
If you with the rain,
yeah,
that's about it. Rainy
rain,
season.
why not? The rain's rain.
Now Belize has been hit pretty hard every couple of decades.
Yeah.
So it's definitely viable.
Everyone's always waiting.
Yeah.
And so so you went to Japan after this trip?
Yeah, Japan was 2006. Actually, Dean and I had our bartending school, Franco Bartending Institute, and this nightclub chain in Japan had started putting out job ads for Canadians because of the work permit issue. Mm-hmm. Coming in under 29, you get a holiday working visa. You're only supposed to work 12 hours a week. That was how they got you in the country.
It's a shift.
And, right? Well, we were much more than that, but legally you're only supposed to work that much. And they started hiring some former students. One was Zach Prohaska from youthflare.com. So when he was there, and then actually, gentlemen, Jay Burrows out in Victoria. So he was, we bartended together, and I taught him to blow fire and juggle a few bottles. So they were both hired, and they kept talking about who trained them. So then this nightclub chain reached out and said, hey, we want to bring you in to do some training. I was only supposed to be there for a month. Ended up staying a little bit longer. Then they said, we want you to go back to Canada and do some recruitment and bring us back some bartenders. Hired 4 bartenders, and we all moved to Japan in later in 2006, and then moved back to Canada in 2008.
How was the culture shock?
It was pretty insane in the beginning. It was kind of what I expected because I did a lot of research, but there was more of a culture shock actually coming home after readjusting back to North America.
What do you mean? I don't have an automatic toilet seat. This is bullshit.
I need something to breathe on my backside. Why doesn't the taxi door just automatically open when I approach? But
there was one thing when I got back from Singapore, I literally tried to jump out of 2 or 3 cabs because we just have an Uber style rideshare. There's just no cabs. So for the first couple of times, I got it starting in the cab. I'm like, oh, I got to pay you. Here you go.
Right.
Because you usually just jump out and off you go. You say, bye, thank you for your day. Have a good day. Yeah.
But the one thing that was so rewarding about that experience is, in my own naivety back then, I was really excited to come in and share and teach and leave a bunch of knowledge about the craft of bartending and about performance bartending. I ended up learning way more about my craft than I left behind on the mixology side. So I came there as a flair bartender thinking I was going to teach cocktails, and I learned more about mixology when I was there. So that really kind of set me down a different path. I was already really into the classics and really thinking I understood a lot of things. But
and then you go to Japan and it's Japanese
process and technique and detail, stirring gin and tonics 10 times. It was still not as necessary as you think it would be, but it really made me start to think about how liquids interact together and just the ritual behind it and how part of that presentation of service and just the wrist movements and everything. So that really refined me behind the bar.
I think, I know that I'm out of it a little bit. You're probably not so much, but I started off flair tending myself, which a lot of people always give me a weird look when I say I started.
The F word.
A lot. It really is the F word, isn't it? I think that for me, what I pulled out of flair tending that I applied to regular bartending is that the mise en place is always on point. That level of showmanship, because a lot of people, and most geeky, hardcore, nerdy bartenders would never like to admit this, is Jerry Thomas was the godfather of both cultures. He was the first flair tender, and he was the godfather of modern mixology.
Yep.
And it just split that way. and became two separate things. And I know that, like, I'm not really plugged into the flair culture still, but I got a lot of friends on Facebook, and so you get the videos. Flair is still a massive market in this world.
Yeah, especially in Europe, and still like tours in places like Vegas is just the mecca. The thing that I with Flair, it's so crazy because I've always used the name, and the name is accurate for describing what it is, but I actually prefer performance bartending.
Yeah.
And not just because we're performing behind the bar, but we're bartending at a higher performance level. Just like you said, the mise en place, you're only as good as you're prepared. If you're practicing routines all the time, you're pretty prepared. But I always liken it to the drummer in a band about not missing a beat. If you can throw out that flourish with your drumstick and not miss that beat and enhance the experience, then it's relevant. If it's taking away from service, as we know, then it's just a show, and that should be on a stage.
And I think that goes both ways. Like, everybody's like, well, Flair, you never get a good drink, and then if a cocktail takes too long because the mixologist is too serious, it's like it's a double-edged sword.
And dry to watch.
And everybody knows that everything tastes better long poured.
Right?
Everything tastes better long poured.
I just released a little promo video, and in it I do a long pour where I slow it right down. And it's the most basic, it is not the most impressive thing that I do in the video, but it's the polarizing element that you're just like, whoa.
Water tastes better long poured. Everything tastes better long poured. Like we used to say, like we'd start pouring water, we'd just go, drop pour water. And they'd be like, why are you doing this? Like, because everything tastes better long poured, man. Come on. This is at Clive's.
Well, this is the perfect time to reference cocktail, because that is another reference where it's like, oh, you love it or you hate it or you identify with it or you think it's what is the demise of our craft. But I saw it when I was 13, and I taught myself to juggle that summer, and that's how kind of the idea of a flair bartender had.
What do you sit on cocktail? This should
be
a question I ask everybody.
Right, you should. Yeah. I think it was for the time, and I do know the consultants that worked there. It was Victor from the Bartending School of Ontario. Much of the movie was actually shot here in Toronto. And if you see the actual mixology that's happening, you know that it's nightclub bartending. It's they obviously did a few cuts and a few different things, and the guy John B. Bandy that actually trained them, in his day, he was the samurai of flair bartending. When you look back on it now, you're like, that is so rudimentary. That is so just like the basics of flair. So it was a great inspiration. I would love, and I've recently talked to Dean about this, I'd love to see it redone with a different
reboot.
take to the story. A reboot. I mean, we are in the era of all these reboots. Cocktail needs to be redone, but not in the Coyote Ugly way where it's really just about the flair and getting up on the bar and just making a mess, which has its place too, but maybe seeing the evolution of the craft and really putting a focus on where we've been, where we're going, what can
any random
happen.
Producer in LA that randomly picks up on my podcast and is listening to in his Mercedes Benz driving down the highway, you heard it first. We need a cocktail reboot.
It's here first. For sure.
So that's 2007, 2008. You get back from Japan.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's a huge amount of experience. Like I think a lot of bartenders in this day and age are worried about stepping out their comfort zone. Like there's some that go, I'll go to London, I'll go to New York. Like you went to Japan and Belize, like two super polarizing areas.
Mm-hmm.
Two
and
major,
could be more different from each other.
Two more major culture shocks. You came back, and that's 2007 to 2008, and you've been with them for 9 years. So, what did you do in those first 2 years back?
Well, it was actually kind of difficult because, the market crashed, the economy, everything that was happening then. Tried to get right back into the special events arena. And previously, all the clients we'd had, Christmas was always booked, corporate events. Like, we were turning away business before I left to Japan. When I came home, the phone wasn't ringing. And I was like, oh, was it me? But no, it was the entire industry, and just the economy wasn't doing so well, so everyone was pulling back. So I ended up being a general manager for a nightclub, which in my background in volume bartending, I was like, no, this works. I ended up over-teaching my staff. I just had such a passion for sharing the knowledge that we're supposed to be making, basic highballs, and I'm teaching them the history of tequila, and they're just like, "But it's a shot, right?" Like I'm like telling the difference between a mixto and 100% agave, whatever. And that's where I really fell in love with whiskey. I mean, whiskey's been a part of my life since childhood. Whiskey on the gums, and Irish grandparents, but that's when I really started to look more into when I was researching all of the spirits. Yet again, I just kind of had this affinity with the whiskey story and bourbon specifically, and that's what actually led me to Maker's Mark. So I was at this nightclub, doing volume bartending, flair bartending, blowing fire behind the bar, just like the good old days, but not feeling fulfilled on the actual quality of the product because we're pushing out plastic cups and drinks and everything, as you do, in a capacity of like 1,500 people in a nightclub. And then this opportunity with Maker's Mark sprung up in 2010. Actually, Mike McLean, Mix It Mike, from Beam, who was the marketing director of Flairco back in the day, known him for 20 years. It popped up on his radar, and he's like, Matty, you're definitely suited for an ambassador role. You should look into this. At the time, I was like, I don't know. I was making like, I don't know, $1,200 every 2 weeks or something as this nightclub manager, and I had a family on the way, and I knew that was not sustainable to keep doing that. So this opportunity came up. So I interviewed with Beam, and there was about 35 applicants I found out after, and then they made me an offer 9 years ago, like this week.
Wow.
And it's been an incredible journey. I've learned so much about myself, about the industry, but I mean, Kentucky left its mark on me, as I reference my whiskey barrel here. But
after you got the job, did you deep dive and take trips to Kentucky straight off the hop and like just deep dive into all of it?
My first onboarding, they sent me to Washington D.C. to kind of mentor under an ambassador there, JVS, John Vickersmith, who's a legend in the whiskey industry south of the border. He's retired now, but his way, his cadence, his way of interacting with people, and he was a historian, and telling the story of bourbon and going back to the Revolutionary War. I've really got an affinity with the history side of things as well. Kind of my tagline is I sip the whiskey and drink the history. So I really had a trademark, by the way. Yeah. I really had a great time with him, and he really opened up my eyes to presenting a brand and really getting the story. And of course, it was very American-centric with the history. But that was actually my first onboarding, and I wouldn't go to the distillery it was November 2010. I finally went to the distillery. November's not exactly the nicest time of year to go, but it was amazing to see the industry in Kentucky, and that at Maker's Mark specifically, to see all the other distilleries and to really get a feel for the people in Kentucky.
Oh, and just everybody's connected so deeply. Like there's always been what did they say? There's always been a Beam, and there's always been a what's the other Grant?
Samuels?
No, not Samuels. There's always been a Beam, and there's always been one other family that's been in every single distillery.
Right?
Like it's Beam and someone else. Is it Russell? I think it's Russell.
Oh, I mean Jimmy Russell with Wild Turkey and his 3 generations, but no, I'm not thinking of it now as well.
But back then, like in 2009, 2010, Jim Beam wouldn't have. I think they only had like Jim Beam White and Maker's Mark as SKUs, didn't they?
I think Red Stag was just being launched, right? And I definitely sold a lot of Red Stag as a cocktail ingredient. But I mean, for those that don't know, it's a cherry flavored whiskey. That's not even whiskey; it's 35% alcohol. It has its place, but there wasn't between the bonded, between all of the Devil's Cut, all of the.
And even then, I don't think bourbon was really. Like Maker's Mark was sort of gaining some rolling traction. Yeah. I was stoked when Basil Hayden hit the BC market,
right?
But like bourbon, it's like as a category, like I think
it was right on the precipice of being.
I think because of everything with social media and how quickly everything happens these days, that we sometimes underestimate how long it's actually been. Like when people go, "Oh, I'm so over bourbon," I'm like, "But bourbon's only been cool for like 6 years, man. Like, why are you over bourbon?"
Right. And we're just following the trend. Oh, it's so over.
Oh, mezcal's so hot right now. I'm like, but dude.
Yeah.
I was talking to Anthony Toplak. He was bringing mezcal into Ontario in 1998.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that whole speed thing is like bourbon and I think rye was that second wave as well. Yeah. And now Jim Beam has got something like 15 SKUs.
I can
on the BC market.
Let's forget the flavors and just in
like
the core whiskeys.
Oh yeah. It's mental.
10 years ago, Victoria and Vancouver, they were the meccas of real mixology happening in Canada on a revolutionary scale. I mean, everything you were doing in Victoria. And then the time was right for Toronto, but even Montreal was still ahead at that point. And then Toronto finally made it to, it was just that tipping point with mixology, and Maker's Mark was primed, set, and ready, because obviously the marketers knew this was going to happen. And it... To pierce the industry the way that Makers did and become the bartender's shot in Montreal.
It was definitely always that you had your Wild Turkeys, your Jim Beam Whites, and that sort of thing. And Maker's Mark was always like a couple bucks for a bottle.
Yeah.
Just a couple bucks.
That hand-dipped,
Yeah.
handcrafted, bespoke. But quite quickly after, I'd say about 4 years after, the hipsters abandoned it because it was, it's too mass-produced. I'm going to drink that Bullet because it's a small batch frontier whiskey. I'm like, I'll do your research on that. But, and not slugging Bullet. Do appreciate the liquid, but that's pretty funny how
hipsters.
People follow trends, quote unquote.
Still drinking PBR.
Yeah.
Just changing up the whiskey.
Yeah.
God. And how long ago? Because I know you transitioned different roles too, didn't you? You went from the bourbon portfolio.
Yep. I spoke to Canadian and Irish throughout that time as well, but really became known as the bourbon guy in Canada for about 7 years. You do reach a point where you kind of get tired of hearing yourself talk, and I was always learning, but I'm very much so. When I stop learning, that's a dangerous thing. If I feel stagnant, then and not that bourbon is boring. I did over 35 curated trips to Kentucky, brought bartenders from the trade across Canada down, had some amazing times, but it was time for something new. The truth of it is, though, bourbon cocktails are still hard to beat, in my opinion. But when it came to whiskey neat in my glass, at the end of the week, I had a hell of a lot more single malt in my glass. And Lefroy was that polarizing whiskey that changed my mind on peated whiskey. When I first had a glass of Lefroy in 2010, I politely pushed it across the table and said, "No, thank you." I was like, people do this for fun? I do not understand it. By 2013, I started finishing glasses of quarter cask, like the Wild Child of Ireland, and I developed an itch that only Lefroy could scratch. So by 2016, 2017, when my predecessor, Marzio, he actually went back to Europe with another opportunity, I was like, no, this feels good. It's time to do the Scotch thing. So.
You get to wear cool kilts and fucking gangster suits.
Right?
You don't wear gangster suits as a bourbon brand ambassador. You wear fucking flannel and denim.
I like to say I've gone from hillbilly to Highlander. Because as you know, I had a substantial crazy beard for the most of my tenure with Beam.
Well, if you see Dave Mitton wearing a rockin' suit to talk about JP Wises, everyone would be like, "No, I'm not feeling this at all."
Yeah, there's something wrong with this. Yeah, on bourbon, I had my cowboy boots. I kind of my uniform. I had my vest, my pocket watch. Like I really lived and breathed that for sure. But one really cool thing that happened, many cool things, but something I would highlight was the cover of Whiskey magazine in 2016, representing Canada for the trade. I was blown away that happened, and it wasn't I wasn't up there just talking about bourbon or being quoted on bourbon or pouring bourbon on the cover. It was actually representing the country and seeing what's happening. In a whiskey magazine that's now saying, look at how we mix whiskey. Yeah. Look at the potential of mixology with whiskey, and to the old guard, that is still wrong. Yeah. So that was very progressive. And then the next year, I was honored with American Whiskey Ambassador of the Year globally. Which is so it was kind of like, oh, okay, so what's next? What do I do now? So I'm like, I'm going for Scotch. Yeah. So that was kind of the timing on that.
And what did you represent when you looked after the Scotch portfolio for...
So Morrison and Bowmore portfolio, Bowmore, Auchentoshan, and Lefroy. Also spoke to Suntory, which was fantastic. TOCC, Hibiki.
Which is starting to make a bigger push now in Canada, which is good.
Finally catching up with the liquid a little bit. And that was just an easy one for me because having lived in the Japanese culture, understanding a little bit of the nuances of the language, and knowing a little bit about the production, I've just always been really honored to speak to Japanese whiskey. And in the Irish category, that's exploding right now. Yeah. And Cooley, Kilbeggan, the Tyrconnell being very big parts of that revolution in Ireland right now. So it's I've spoke to almost every whiskey from our company from Canada, the U.S., Ireland, Scotland, and Japan.
Amazing.
Which has been very cool.
So you're finishing up in 2 weeks?
Yep.
What's the plan?
Can you say? I can. Officially now
Officially
I can.
You can?
Yeah.
Okay.
So my career is coming full circle. I actually started in the kitchen. Started washing dishes at 13 in a breakfast diner. Ended up line cooking. Always just cooked. And then the bar became hospitality. Really brought me to the front of the house, and then bartending really solidified that for me. But I've always had kind of a passion for cooking and cooking for my kids. And in the last couple of years with the travel, it just it became a lot for me. So I needed to take a bit of a break, focus on my family, and that passion for cooking at home really took over again. But in the time that I've been with Beam with these different brands, we've done our spirited dinners. Always doing consumer-facing events where whiskey is the focus, but culinary being a way to deliver the message and to supplement the tasting with food, but then creating something different. So I kind of coined the term mixogastro in terms of mixology and gastronomy, bringing elements of food into the drinks. Fat washing was a big thing, which is a little bit overdone now here and there with how it's done, but we did a lot of fat washing back in the day. And
you don't want a Thanksgiving dinner washed bourbon?
Right. My turkey gravy and stuffing in my Manhattan. What's
wrong with you?
But that is kind of where I would like to go, and to travel, instead of traveling 70% of the year, to be home with my family. That was the big reason to make the change. But then I started looking into culinary and saying, well, I really got to earn these credentials. I've worked with talented chefs and very innovative chefs across the country in every single province. I've had the privilege to do that, from Victoria right to St. John's, Newfoundland, and every one of these chefs has inspired me. And speaking to the brands with their brand together and collaborating on recipes, it really started to all come together for me in the last couple of years that this is what I actually want to do. So, to get back to your question, I will be taking part-time classes at, say, college for culinary, with the idea that I might be teaching some of those classes in the future. And I'm doing a ministry-approved chef apprenticeship under Chef John Alvarez of F&B, Food and Beverage in Windsor, Ontario. So doing an apprenticeship there, as well as I just launched my website yesterday, whiskynoechef.ca, and that's going to be more of a blog to chronicle my cocktail and culinary adventures in the next few years, and kind of seeing where that goes. So I'm pulling back from the beverage alcohol industry in a very big way, but whiskey's still going to be a part of everything I do in the future, in terms of bringing those cocktail and culinary experiences together. So that's kind of where I feel my all the years of hard work and bottle slinging and flipping burgers, kind of bringing it all together to.
And now you're going to be in a hot kitchen, cutting yourself with knives.
I just turned 40 last month. People are like, you're giving up this career, you're going to pivot this way, you're going back to school, you're insane. You're absolutely insane. It is a bold move. I do feel, you've gone back to school at our maturity, you could say, and it is scary. There's lots of anxiety behind it, but it's also so exciting.
And the thing is, I think everybody, when I went, people are like, why are you going back to school? I'm like, well, I want to extend my knowledge, and the stuff that I learned in school, which I'm missing this term because I'm working again, but I'm using that now, like HR and stuff, which I hated HR class, with a fucking passion, that now I'm actually utilizing for 2 different projects, one in Montreal and one in Singapore.
Okay.
And I hated that class hard, but I'm using it hard. But the thing is, at the end of the day, is does it make you happy? And I think at the end of the day, if you're going back to school and cooking at F&B, and we both know Scully, and so I think you're supposed to be up today, but I don't think he's made it up here. But
I haven't seen him yet.
But the thing is, at the end of the day, a lot of people don't ask themselves when they do stuff, does it make you happy?
Yep.
Does it still make you happy? It's a big question.
That's it.
Well, but I really appreciate you sitting down with me.
Of course. I mean, it's about time. We've been trying to get together for months and months.
I was so bummed that I missed
your jet set all over the place.
I was bummed I missed your last seminar in Victoria. Really bummed about that. And the messages I got afterwards, I was just like, fuck you guys. You did make Solomon go out and buy 7 new bottles of alcohol that we did not have room for on the back bar. So I'm just I walked back and I'm like, why is the back bar so stuffed? Well, we did that Suntory seminar with Matt, and then Solomon went out and bought this, and this. I'm like, oh, come on, dude, you're killing me.
That means Michelle and I did our job.
Damn straight. I'm helping Michelle do a seminar. What day is it? Today, actually.
Okay.
Right now, in Victoria, there is a seminar about to start with Ray Daniels that I helped organise before I left.
That's one thing that's amazing about you, is you literally can be on different continents at the same time. Not physically, but literally you are influencing events and things that are happening, promotions, in real time.
Yep.
And it happens all the time.
I try really hard. But thanks a lot, bud. I appreciate it.
Thank you, brother.
Cheers, man. Bye. Another awesome session.
Thanks, Post Shifters. I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you're listening, whatever platform you're on, give me a good rating, subscribe, listen along. I'm going to keep going. I really enjoy sitting down with people and learning where they're from, what they did, and how they got to where they were. So if you love it, give me a good 5 stars. If you don't, give me 1 and I'll try harder.